Okay, welcome back to another episode of A Case for Health. This is episode 3, and I'm Delia here with my homie Doug. We are not doctors or people with any fancy titles. We are just people, moms, husbands, we are just normal people that want the truth for our families. And so we're going to dig into some interesting topics as we've both been on some interesting roads of health and understanding the ins and outs of it. So today, we're going to dig into something that I'm going to let Doug introduce. So, what are we going to dabble with, Doug? How you doing?
Good morning. So I was just doing some research this morning, and an interesting one popped up when I was looking at this. And that was the FDA have warned Dr. Mercola to stop writing about vitamin D. And the bulk of the article is discussing vitamin D in regards to the current pandemic situation and him talking about the potential positive effects of vitamin D due to that. So it got me thinking, and I wanted to branch out and do some further research on that, and this is just what I've learned over the last year especially, is there's this talk amongst the circles out there of this current outbreak having an ownership structure to it, meaning somebody actually owns the technology of the current outbreak. And you can go on the internet and there's websites that will champion that. There's websites that will counteract that argument. So like we're seeing so much in everything nowadays, there's so much suppression going on in the media and on these larger platforms as to what can and cannot be said, and what's considered conspiracy theory and what's considered fact. And people are left completely confused on what's the real truth here. So I just quickly typed into a Google search, and anybody can do this, COVID-19 patent, coronavirus patent. So there came up with a lot of sites that say, this is a conspiracy. It's not owned by anybody. It's not anything else. Like, you're looking in the wrong area. Like, there's nothing to see here. But a quick Google search, and this information is right here for anybody to see, is US patent number 101-307-01B2, which is the abstract of the application presented by the Fulbright Institute in 2015. An application was granted, which means that there is a patent on the coronavirus. Is this conspiracy theory? Well, unless the US Patent Office is a conspiracy theory, we're looking at a patent on coronavirus, which is set to expire in 2035.
Does it say when it was created?
It was issued in 2017. 2018, 11/20 is when the application was granted.
2017.
Yeah, 2017 and 2018. November 20th of 2018, the application was granted, which means they had a patent. So am I spewing conspiracy theory? No, I'm looking at the US Patent Office right now and seeing a patent on that. So what that means is we've seen an absolute war on natural health over the last year and a half now. We've seen them going after vitamin D, hydroxychloroquine, silver, pretty much any natural botanical that's ever been documented or reported to provide a positive attribute to a viral load. Mm-hmm. Right? And there's thousands of studies, and years and years of research into natural botanicals and viruses. So what's the difference? This is owned. So when you own something, when you own a patent on something, you get to basically dictate and control what is used around your intellectual property. So if we look at this current outbreak as intellectual property and it's owned, then they can control the narrative around that, and they can control what is used to combat that. So here's where it gets a little bit more interesting. So the application was filed by the Fibright Institute. So I go to the Fibright Institute, PIRBRIGH2, or GHT, Fibright Institute. And I find on their website, Fibright's expertise in viral disease is aiding to the fight against COVID-19. So that creates a real interesting question in my head. This company filed the application of ownership for this pandemic, and now on their website, aiding to the fight against COVID-19.
Wow.
So let that sink in for a second. You own it and you're trying to fight it. So there's only one common denominator that you can come to in a conclusion on that is follow the money. This company is controlling who and how gets to interact with their intellectual property, i.e., the things that people are putting in their bodies coming through needles for in a massive amounts of money. You tracking with me here?
Yeah, like, so it's just like, so I'm like, okay, how does this even work? Like, I'm just like, how? Because it would just seem too obvious, right?
I'm literally
Violate the
just
patent,
looking at this, looking totally, and I'm just looking at this in real time.
Yeah.
So, I do a little bit more digging, and I just typed into Google, and the reason why I'm saying I'm typing this into Google is because anybody should be able to resort to find what I'm saying. I'm not looking at any secret databases. I'm just basically letting my fingers do the curiosity and asking some questions, and then looking at the websites that it's taking me to. So this is on the Fibright website as well. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funds them for $5.5 million in November of 19.
Funded by the Gates. Okay. Well, that's another trigger right there.
So we can totally go down a long rabbit hole on this and probably spend hours and days and weeks, connecting all the dots. The thing that I just find extremely interesting in this is this information is being suppressed on a daily basis and being classified as conspiracy theory and being demonized when it's right there in front of us. And unfortunately, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get looking over here. You don't want to look here at the truth. Look over here. Look at this sensational thing that's happening over here to take your mind off of this. And like, we could go so much deeper on this, but this, like I say, this morning as I was looking and I saw Dr. Mercola, get hit by the FDA. And unfortunately, he's a regular target of the FDA with the things that he says. I just wanted to kind of chase back that narrative for my own interest, to see, the whys and the hows behind it, because I'm always asking the questions of, okay, why does something do something, or why does somebody, get hit with something, or that kind of thing. And it's not as much the fact that he's having the conversation with his viewers about natural botanicals healing, treating, curing different conditions, right? It's more along the lines that he's in patent infringement. But the FDA and Big Pharma can't go after him and say, you're in patent infringement, because that would blow their cover. Mm-hmm. Right? So they have to go after him on the healing, treating, curing, natural botanical avenue that they hate, because if society and the general public found out that it was a patent infringement, well, that would blow the doors wide open on what they're trying to keep hidden on this.
Wow. So who is Dr. Mercola for those that don't know? So I came across him in actually I was at a biohacking conference like 4 years ago, and he was one of the keynote speakers. So for my understanding, he's kind of like one of the head thought leaders in kind of natural wellness and kind of biohacking your system using more of the items that were given to us here on earth. So is that a good kind of description? How would you describe Dr. Mercola to like someone who's never heard of him before?
He's a natural doctor that promotes healing. And what we're seeing in our world nowadays is we've got the conventional doctors that unfortunately are being dictated as to what they can do through the physician's desktop reference manual, which basically is a treating methodology that's controlled by Big Pharma. Then we've got the doctors on the other side of the fence, the naturopathics, the holistic medicine providers that are focused more on healing the body with natural botanicals and getting our body back to its true state. So Dr. Mercola is one of the foremost thought leaders in creating healing, biohacking, and remedies that, have been used for generations to positively affect the body.
And the reason why he's become so popular is because they work. His advice is very good, and stuff that I coincidentally found on my own avenue before I knew who he was. Like, I was like, wow, okay, this guy's talking about all this stuff that I had just learned and proved for myself in my own body and in my husband and in my family. So like, that's the thing. It's like, you can't deny the truth as long as you give it a chance to prove itself. Right. And so so you mentioned the physician's desktop manual. So was that, if I'm remembering correctly, wasn't silver on there at some point and then got taken off, or no?
It was in there, and I can't remember how many references or how many applications there was, but there were many in the physician's desktop manual prior to antibiotics and prior to the takeover of Big Pharma in the early 1900s.
And so if for someone who doesn't really know what that is, like, I'm not a doctor and I don't use that term very often, but I have heard it from our mutual friend who we don't name, but so is that basically a doctor can only recommend something if it's on that manual?
So the doctors have to live in a very tight world. And if they don't, the unfortunate thing is I believe when a doctor decides to go to med school, they go because they actually have the best interest on helping humanity. And unfortunately, for many of them, they get into this system that they can't get out of. And, I know a number of amazing doctors that truly want to help people, but by the time they get through med school and they receive their PhDs, they're unfortunately stuck within a system that they can't work with natural botanicals. They can't work with anything other than what the system dictates that they can say or not say. And I know many doctors, regular PhD family practitioners and regular doctors that I've had conversations with over the years, that even for their own families, they realize, unfortunately, the damage that a lot of these medications cause. And they look outside the box for their own families to take care of certain conditions but unfortunately they're not able to offer those to their patients that come in because they have to live within the system. And it's sad.
Yeah. Wow. So it's like that's kind of my family's journey, right? After a diagnosis, the pharmaceutical didn't work, and so we had to go to other means where we encountered people like Dr. Mercola and the whole biohacking space and natural medicine wellness, and made some mutual friends here. And so with this whole attack on vitamin D, like I haven't even read the article. Like what does it say? Like how does it, because I've even heard the hype guy around this, the Dr. F, the one who's the face of what to do and how many masks to wear and all of that. I won't say his full name, but I've even heard him at first, like there's clips of him one saying vitamin D isn't good, and then clips of him saying, oh, well, there have been some benefits. And so he's kind of flip-flopped on the vitamin D discussion, just from clips that I've seen that people piece together. What are they saying about Dr. Mercola and why D is an issue? Like, I haven't read the article, so what are they trying to claim if it's not infringement, copy or patent infringement?
One of the quotes in this article is Americans are justifiably concerned about becoming infected with the coronavirus and contracting COVID-19. Being misled to believe that supplements could prevent or treat COVID-19 could cause consumers to take protective measures such as mask wearing, putting themselves and others at risk, or failing to seek actual medical treatment if sick. So when I read that, I read competition.
Yeah.
Right. And I read it as a hit piece. So you know what an interesting study to do would be one day, and unfortunately, I would say we would never be able to pull this off. But I would love to do a survey of 1,000 people that are seeing a general GP doctor for their health conditions, and essentially doing a survey of what their status report is from day one where they go to see that physician out a year to 2 years, to see how many medications they've taken, prescriptions they've received, and where their actual status is 2 years down the road, right? And then do that exact same survey on the natural health practitioners. What botanicals they used, where they were day one to where they were, the same time period, like do a proper survey on both sides to truly see where people are at after a certain time period, dealing with similar conditions or the same conditions, and letting the data speak the truth. That'd be a real interesting survey to try and do, or figure out how to do, but data is so tight around that.
I'd love to see that. That, because like in my mind, as I've gone down this road, for a few years now, like my thought process is like, this is so obvious, right? It's like night and day what's more effective and what's not in many instances. And so yeah, I'm like, why isn't there a bunch of research? And so like, does it just boil down to the funding? Like, because there's this huge competition on the other side that has billions of dollars they're throwing away to add confusing data? Or is it just people aren't putting money towards the other side? Or is it because the articles, once they do it, are getting taken down? Just like the article you were referencing in last episode. Like how do we get this shift,
Well, it boils down to lobbying, it boils down to funding. And unfortunately, these large companies that are controlling the narratives that we see advertised all over TV every night have essentially unlimited resources and the largest, deepest pocketbooks of any company in the world. So they can take a natural health supplement company, for instance, and sue them into the Stone Age.
Mm.
And they've got the backing of the FDA, they've got the backing of the courts, they've got the backing of the whole system. It's crazy just how much power these companies have over our lives.
Mm.
And we see, we see these people that are trying to step out and truly want to help people, being demonized and deplatformed and taken down on a daily basis. It boils back down to what we've talked about in prior episodes, where it's all about patents.
Mm-hmm.
Can't patent a natural botanical.
Yeah. And that's so in all of the articles, especially referencing this vitamin D attack on Dr. Mercola, right? Like every single natural medicine attack, it's always the same thing. It's like, according to the FDA, vitamin C and vitamin D3 and quercetin, I don't know if that's how you say that, but our products are unapproved new drugs sold in violation of the, it's basically, it's not FDA approved, right? Like they're not giving the sign off and the authority for them to sell this to help your body heal. It doesn't matter if it works. Like they don't even ever talk about if it's work and studies linked to it that support it. It's just, we haven't given our approval for this. And
Right.
what's I find ironic, and I don't know if I haven't fact checked this or not, but for my understanding, this jab that we're talking about that people are lining up for, right? That's on an emergency release where technically that is not even approved by the FDA, right? Am I
No,
understanding
you're
that
you're
correctly?
you're still correct, and it's not conspiracy theory for us to say that either. It still is in its emergency classification. So it hasn't. It's been so it hasn't been. It's been approved for an emergency application. So people are lining up for this, and I believe the news media is doing a fantastic job at telling a narrative, and they keep using certain key words, the word vaccine, for instance. They keep using the word vaccine. Well, even these companies that are making these products are saying it's not a vaccine. So people are lining up thinking that they're getting a vaccine when in fact it's not.
What is
Okay.
it?
We'll come back to that in a minute.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So it's not a vaccine. It hasn't been approved by the FDA. It hasn't been approved as like a standard vaccine would. It's been approved for emergency, but they're not telling people this. Like the news media isn't saying, "Hey, here's a potential solution to the problem," right? That hasn't finished. An honest news reporter would say to people, here's something that's been approved due to an emergency situation. It hasn't gone through its animal testing. It hasn't gone through its full rounds of human testing. We don't know exactly what the side effects are going to be because we don't have enough big enough case study. Use it at your own risk, but here's an option.
Yeah.
That's what an honest news reporter would say. But instead, we see every night on the nightly news, more vaccines, more vaccines, more vaccines. People are lining up. We're at 80 million or whatever people that have taken it now. And it's almost like a peer pressure approach for people to take it, and completely side skirting the conversation of what the potential outcomes could be.
Yeah. Like what I thought of when, I had family members like trying to pressure my parents who, they're older, but they're super healthy. And we're pretty sure they already got exposed to it and probably have the antibodies, was that first conversation we had on our super long episode 1, where you broke down how the marketing of the pharmaceutical company is super brilliant in that they, instead of focusing on the reps to try and convince the doctors, then they cut out all these middle pieces and went right to the customer and advertise to them in a way so that they would be the ones asking for it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, these people are asking for it and they're pressuring everybody else around them to get it,
Well, and
which
that's what we're seeing now with this is, people are lining up for it for the belief that, this is going to end this. And, we can say this because Dr. Fauci was talking about this within the last couple of days, that most of the questions that he was asked, he didn't know the answer to. People were saying, when can we take the masks off? And he's like, we don't know, because we don't know if it's going to stop the spread. We don't know that if once you take this jab, if you're still going to be able to transmit this to other people. We don't know. They're saying that we believe that all we know is it will lessen the pain you'd get, if you got the virus, right? It would lessen the effects. So everybody's lining up for this, with right now the only, and I'm just repeating what Dr. Fauci says. I'm not putting my own thought or feeling into this. But when the top medical expert that everybody is watching is saying the only thing that we know that this may lessen the effects if you get the virus, right? We don't know if it's going to stop the transmission. We don't know anything else because we're still in the test phase. Well, if I'm lining up to get something put into my body, and the difference between this and anything else in human history, this is forever. Like, you don't get to unget this once you get it, right? If you take pharmaceutical drugs, or you take pills, or you take anything else, it may take some time, but it's going to pass through the body, right? This jab that people are lining up for, it's a forever decision. So before somebody makes that decision, don't take what the news media is saying to you. Even the top expert, who everybody's been referencing for the last close to 2 years now as the top expert, Dr. Fauci, even he's saying publicly, we don't know the answers to a lot of these questions because we're still in the test phase. Personally, my body's not a guinea pig for big pharma. And I've seen enough damage caused by the medical system over the last number of years that, for me, it's a trust issue. Why is it all of a sudden I'm now going to trust these companies that can't even keep their story straight, that have a patent on this, right?
I still don't even.
Every time we talk, there's more questions and answers that come out of this.
I know. My brain is like, oh, how does it work? How is it possible? If that really is what's going on, like, how is it not obvious to everybody? Like, so I'm just,
because people are being discouraged from seeking their own truth. And that's what it boils down to, is people are being discouraged from seeking their own truth. Because we see it now more than ever, via social media and via these large platforms, that if people dare step out of the lines of narrative, they're either deplatformed or ridiculed amongst their peers. And I would say the system's done a brilliant job at convincing people to believe a narrative.
And like the biggest demonstration, like more recently we had, of just like the suppression of free thought, like whether whatever anyone's saying is truthful or not truthful or whatever, like our free speech, right? That's what we're kind of founded on here. Like even the president of the United States got filtered, right? Like that to me is like an extreme scenario. Like I'm just like, is this real? Like how is it, like I don't know, like whether you believe what's being said or not, like people should still have a voice and still have that right to keep inquiring and keep learning, and whether whatever the source is. And I'm just like, the hypocrisy is so obvious once you really boil it down to the core discussion being had. And with, as we were talking, the whole FDA argument, right? Every single natural wellness thing, ones that I've used that have been miracles in my life, every bad word that's said about it in the press is because it's not approved by the FDA. Yet we have the thing that everyone's expected to rely on. That in itself is technically not proved or approved according to the FDA either, right? So it's like they're both technically not approved, yet one, we ignore that piece and we just say, well, it's an emergency, and don't even highlight that point. And then the other one, it works and you just are going to shut it down because the FDA didn't say so. So I'm just like, man, the hypocrisy just gets so obvious and clear. And it's just like,
So here's an interesting thought. Is we talked a few minutes ago about doing a survey on conventional doctors versus natural doctors, and just seeing what that study would be over time. So here's just another interesting one to think about is the FDA, so Food and Drug Administration, regulates foods and drugs, and we've talked in prior episodes about foods and the chemicals and the side effects of those chemicals. So it would be interesting if there is a possibility to go through the entire FDA database at every approved substance that they have approved, and seeing that if there's any approved substances that actually don't have a list of side effects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the natural side of wellness, all the non-approved substances and what the side effects are. Because in my recollection, and I'm not a medical professional, is what's the side effect of vitamin D? Right? What's the side effect to turmeric? What's the side effect to a natural herb or a natural botanical that comes directly from the earth?
Absolutely. And so taking it back to this article, it's like they don't say anything bad about vitamin D. They don't say it's bad for you, and they can't make any claims to side effects because they don't exist, right? And what they say is, from what you were reading, their argument is, oh, it might get people to stop wearing masks and stuff.
It might lead people away from a big pharmaceutical application.
Yeah, well, it might lead, and even just the mask, like even the simple stuff, I'm just like, that's the reason to not take it. Like it's just, when you read it with new lenses, right? Like it just makes it's so clear. Like I can't believe I couldn't notice those things before. I used to just take an article and read it and just be like, okay, that's what they say.
Well, and if I'm reading this properly, and I can imagine the letter that would have been served to Dr. Mercola. The interesting thing is he probably received a letter, and I haven't seen it, and I don't want to speak out of turn, is he probably received a letter that says the information that he is putting out there allegedly could cause damage to people. Okay, so allegedly is a big word here, because if they're essentially accusing him of a crime, where are the people that have been hurt? They're only alleging that the information. They don't have a list. And we're going to talk about this in an upcoming episode, where we're actually going to talk about some legal aspects to natural health and how many of these cases are actually very weak. And I know that Dr. Mercola over time has been very successful in combating the claims against him, and I feel very confidently that he will, because actually no crime has been committed. If there was a list of people that had taken his advice and that had caused irreparable harm to their bodies. Now there's actually truly a case against him because he's caused damage. But allegedly saying that what you're saying could cause damage, where's the hurt party? Right? There is no hurt party. The only hurt party is the FDA and the companies that are making these other substances that people are taking. And the only hurt party is those companies, because allegedly the information that, let's say, Dr. Mercola is putting out there is taking profits away. Mm-hmm. And then this is a whole other episode for us to talk about at some point. But I think we've given people a lot to think about today. Yeah. And as always, please subscribe to the channel. If you like what we're talking about, please share it and let us know what you'd like us to do some research and discussion around. But we're here to learn ourselves. We're not medical professionals. We don't claim to be. We're just having an open dialogue each week of what we see and doing some research around that so that we can better equip ourselves for our families. And hopefully you're finding some inspiration in this for your families.
All right. Well, thank you guys. This was a wonderful discussion, and read between the lines, and hopefully this inspires you, and we'll check back next week with another episode.
Thank you.
Have a blessed day.
See you later.